You want the best for your car? You already watch our tutorials.
So the best place for the best deal is to buy from the Mr. Auto app. Easy, fast, and with better prices than on the website.
You will find the bulk shock absorbers used in the video exclusively on the Mr. Auto website and through the link in the description. Turn your engine off, pull up the handbrake, pull on the bonnet release lever and open the bonnet. In order to change the front shock absorbers on your vehicle, you must lift the front of the car and remove the wheels to have complete access to the suspension system. Loosen the stud bolts on the front wheels. Raise the front of the vehicle and put it in the two-axle stands. We strongly suggest watching the tutorial, raising your vehicle safely before carrying out this step. You will then be able to take off the wheels. Don't forget to slide them under the vehicle. To be able to change this kind of shock absorber, you have to separate the control arm and the cardan shaft from the stub axle. Start by unscrewing the hub nut slightly. To be able to unscrew the hub screw, you have to immobilize the disc to prevent it from rotating. We recommend screwing the stud bolt back onto the wheel so as to not break the holding screw on the disc. Insert a thin flathead screwdriver that can slip in between the two sides of the disc. With an iron bar and a 27mm socket, unscrew the hub nut without removing it. You now have to remove the stabilizer link bar. Use a 19mm open-end spanner. These elements can often get jammed, so use a penetrating oil to facilitate the operation. Unscrew the 3 nuts on the ball joint attachment from the wishbone using a ratchet, a 16-gauge socket and a 17-gauge socket. Using a crowbar, pry the wishbone out of the ball joint completely. Using a ratchet, an M14 Triple square socket and an 80mm spanner, unscrew the screw from the shock absorber foot. Then remove it. Now, using an 18mm spanner, release the holding lock nut on the tie rod. If you don't have a ball joint puller, take a hammer and hit the lock nut hard just at the end of the threading. The ball joint should move away from the pivot. Remove the ABS sensor hose. Using a 10mm spanner, unscrew the holding base on the brake hose. Using a hammer, slide a thin chisel into the opening of the steering knuckle. This will slightly separate it and help remove the shock absorber. Lightly tap the steering knuckle to free the bottom of the shock absorber. Remove the hub screw. Prepare a stable elevated surface to place all the steering knuckle once it's free. You can now remove the gimbal from the steering knuckle. Take out the waterproofing joint on the windscreen bay by pulling it upwards from one end to the other. Then lift the windscreen. You can now access the heads of your car's shock absorbers. Using a socket wrench and a 13mm socket, unscrew the 3 holding screws on the shock absorber. Once released, hold the shock absorber in one hand and finish off the unscrewing with the other hand. Put the shock absorber to the side.
Please support us, subscribe and like the video, that will be really cool.
In order to change the shock absorber, you must now separate it from the spring. Careful, pay attention as you compress the spring. This is not without risk and should be undertaken paying very careful attention. Once the shock absorber is free in the spring, using a 22mm offset wrench and a 6mm Allen socket, you can unscrew the lock nut on the shock absorber rod. In the most extreme cases, you have to use an impact wrench. Remove the lower suspension strut support bearing and all the upper spring support. You can now remove the shock absorber from the spring. You will find the bulk, parts and products used in the video on the Mr. Auto site and in the link in the description. Take your new shock absorber. Push on the actuator to remove the security lock. You need to pump it several times on the actuator to get the system going. Unscrew the lock nut on the stem. Put the stop plate in the sleeve and slip it onto the shock absorber. Position everything in the spring. Pay careful attention to place the bottom of the spring so that it supports the shock absorber flange. Then install all the upper spring support, the lower suspension strut support bearing, and finish by screwing in the lock nut onto the shock absorber stem. Make sure it is well tightened. Unscrew the spring compression tool, paying attention to the position of the spring on the lower shock absorber support. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. You have now finished preparing the new part. Start by putting your shock absorber in place, then screw the head of the shock absorber back in. Start by hand, then finish off with a socket wrench. The final tightening should be done with a torque wrench. Put the windscreen frame back in place. Put the waterproof joint back. Sand and grease the inside of the steering knuckle to help facilitate the reinsertion of the shock absorber. Grease the bottom of the shock absorber too. The metal stop on the shock absorber foot must fit into the opening of the rocket holder. Push the shock absorber foot roughly into the stub axle holder. Then insert the cardan shaft into the stub axle holder. Tighten the hub screw a few threads. You can use a hammer to tap it until the metal stop disappears, and you can screw the screw back in. Screw the foot of the screw back into the shock absorber. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. It is then necessary to screw the bolt joint of the control arm back onto the control arm. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Put the tie rod end back in place. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Screw the holding base on the brake hose. Clip the ABS sensor hose back in. Put the sway bar link back in place. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Reuse the screwdriver technique to block the rotation of the disc and to be able to lock the hub screw on the disc. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Put the wheels of your vehicle back on and lower it to the ground. Operation completed.
Hello, if this video helped you, like and subscribe.